Like the sport, everything about it just blew my mind. So this race has a deep spot in my heart, it being the first race and it being what really kind of got me hooked on the sport. I did it in 2015 for the first time. Took a couple years to get back, life, jobs, et cetera, but went back in 2018 and did it again a second time with Dan Kimball, the guy who got me into swim run. It was actually 2018 when I really kind of became friends with Tor. We talked over the next couple of years, and before we came back for the 2022 race is when he kind of talked me into, hey, why don't you come a little bit early? You can kind of give me a hand.
He put you to
And
work
then,
for that.
yep,
Setting the course. Yeah.
yep. And that was the year that I agreed to mark the bulk of the course. But it was in 2022 that I really kind of became really good friends with Tor and helped him out with the race. And it was in 2023 that Beak and I decided that we weren't going to race it prior to Worlds. And that's when Tor's like, hey, why don't you help me race direct?
Welcome to the Low Tide Boyz, a swim run podcast. I'm Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 284 of the show. It's a big number, people.
It is.
And we got a big show for everyone this week. You may or may not know that one of the hardest swim runs on the planet is Rockman, which is taking place in about a month from the airing of this show. So we thought it'd be great to do a course walkthrough video similar to the one we did for Attila a few years ago with our friend Oscar Olsen. We decided to invite our other friend, because we have a lot of swim run friends.
Swim run friends.
The one and only Marcus Barton. This is going to be his 7th time on the show in some capacity, whether he's been the guest or he's provided some wisdom. This is the most experienced swim runner in America, one of the co-race directors of Rockman right now. And we asked him to come on and just be like, inspire us, fill us with awe, also prepare us for anyone who's thinking about doing this or might be doing this in a month. So that's what this show's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost an unintentional race briefing. It's just so comprehensive about every leg of the long course as well as the short course and even the trail run that they're offering for the first time at Rockman. And so, this list is obviously, it's out there. This was the first non-Swedish swim run, the first swim run that happened outside of Sweden. Great shout out to Thor there, who has done a lot for the swim run world.
For sure. Putting on super hard races, really to the spirit of swim run, which is like, how hard can we make this thing? Let's do that.
Yeah, Thor knows what to do. He's been working with Rockman himself on courses. They change it up every year. So it's always cool to see it's a little bit different every year and to hear about this year's edition. Now, before we get all the way into more of the show, when we wrapped up with Marcus, he said, I forgot to mention a few things. There is a few spots available still for both the long course, the short course, and the trail run, which is about 20 kilometers. So if somehow your training block has, can support jumping into potentially the hardest swim run there is in the next 3 weeks, sign up.
Let us know if you sign up because you heard this show. We would love to hear that. In addition, like with any swim run, they could use a bunch of volunteers. So if you're already going out there or you're thinking of spending some time in Scandinavia this summer in a month from now and you want to volunteer and really check out, really is like just awesome. Like people overuse awesome, especially where I'm from in Boston. Awesome is like every other word. This is awesome. This is actually awesome.
And I will say as a Californian, this is a hella cool swim run.
Yes.
So you definitely want to check that out. The race itself is obviously, it starts with actually a swim. You're jumping off a ferry. You're swimming into shore. You're doing the 4,444 steps. It's logistically challenging. So all the support that they can get from the volunteers. Maybe you were inspired by Christine Shipkey's episode a few weeks ago to go out and volunteer. I know that's a great way to give back to the community, but they can always use volunteers. But if you're so inspired to race, make that happen for yourself as well.
Yeah. And before we get to that, we have to do one major shout out. So for the past month, we've been redoubling our efforts to raise money for Wild Swim Run's Wild Youth Initiative, which helps get women and girls into the sport of swim run. And so we're running the scholarship program, got a bunch of donations, so thank you everyone. But at the last minute, our dear friend Liza came in with a huge donation. So she got us over the top. I think we have enough to fund two people to go to their next camp. So thank you so much for everyone who donated. Really appreciate you. Like, this organization is awesome. So if you don't know anything about Wild Swim Run, go to wildswimrun.org, learn about them. sign up, volunteer, do all the things. There's such a great group of people that are really trying to push the sport forward in exactly the way that we want it, which is inclusive, diverse, welcoming, no pressure.
Absolutely.
Keep it easy.
So thank you, Liza, for that. Just a tremendous show of support there. You don't have to wait for us to do fundraisers. We're always accepting donations. So you can throw those in there. Every week we mention it on the show. It happens. Someone donates.
Yeah.
So if you want to get a shout out, that's a good way. As co-chief t-shirt officer of the Low Tide Boyz, I will authorize a free swag t-shirt with the next donation that we
didn't
get.
talk about this.
It's coming right out. It's coming right out of the t-shirt pile. So if you want a Low Tide Boyz t-shirt, throw a donation over. Or if you want a shout out, it's a good way to make that happen as well.
For sure. So just give a programming alert. So Chipper and I were both going to be going on vacations. So Chipper's going to be going to France and also doing a swim run over there, which we're going to record. We're basically going to record our conversation after this. A race report after the show.
This will be our trickiest race report.
Yeah. I'll be in Costa Rica. Chipper's going to be in France. We're going to make it work, people. It's going to be a very raw episode. So stay tuned for that in a couple of weeks. And, but yeah, the show must go on. So we'll keep providing really good content for everyone. But I think with that, if you're thinking about Rockman, if you've had spent any time on YouTube, just put Rockman in there at 2:30 in the morning amidst your Attila and other swim run, searches.
Video content.
Trust us. It's pretty epic. In fact, I'd say if you're listening to this, go put on one of those videos.
Absolutely.
And if you're watching this, well, watch this first and then go watch.
Yeah. And then, go and add it to your playlist there. This past weekend, the European swimrun season kicked off with swimrun Otala Uto in the birthplace of swimrun. Looked like a day out there.
Awesome.
I saw some pretty winds. They were recommending potentially double wetsuits, but looked like a really amazing day. The FOMO was high from over here in the States.
Yeah. And shout out to the winners. Most of the winners are also doing one water race, incidentally. So they did Uta, and then a bunch of them were doing an overnight swim run, like on the archipelago. So I know Adriel and Hugo were doing that, which is just like, it's insane.
That's pretty awesome. So yeah, we're swim run season's in full swing here, folks. We got back from Bellingham just a week ago. Whistler's coming up in less than a month. Rockman Swimrun's coming up in rest of the month. And then we have the European season underway as well. And things are already popping off over in France. It's moving and shaking, people. Swimrun's here. It's swimrun season, baby. We're pumped. But let's kick it over to our conversation with the one and only Marcus Barton, the one-time winner of the Low Tide Boy of the Year.
Yeah, Mr. Low
Tide Boy of the Year 2020.
The only time that award's ever been given.
Yeah, we only give them out during pandemics.
These are jokes we mentioned during the interview.
Yeah, so we're recycling these.
All right.
Shut it down. Oh, don't forget, I'll look at our plant. Someone's going to be like, you guys are killing that.
All right, back on the show for the 7th time. I was doing some math earlier, trying to get not only his actual appearances on the show, but his wisdom on the show, because I think that counts as well. Coming back for the 7th time, Marcus Barton. How are you, buddy?
Hey, how are you? Even when you guys brought it up in the little pre-show, like seven times, that's a lot.
It's countless
references
a lot.
too.
Yeah,
it's a lot, but we've been doing this show for 5 years. You're the most experienced swim runner in America. I mean, the first year we did this show, we named you Mr. Low Tide Boy 2020 for some reason. The only person ever to get such a distinction.
Yeah, that was a COVID only award. So that one, hopefully we never have another one of those.
We have to bring COVID back in order to give it out again.
No.
It's just yours.
You just keep it. I see it on the mantle back there. So
yeah, we're having you back once again because you are now one of the co-race directors of Rockman, which is a race that captures a lot of people's imagination, sort of outside of the World Championship or some of the new, more French races. This is one of the hardest swim runs in the world. Also, not counting one water race because that's sort of like in its own category.
Yeah.
But we thought it'd be really cool to do just to help wrap people's brain around like what this course is, to do a course walkthrough similar to the one we did for the Attila the Swim World Championship with Oscar Olsen, which if you're doing the World Championship, I think It's a little self-serving on our part, but we think that's like mandatory listening. And we thought it'd be helpful to do something for Rockman in the same way because, yeah, this course kind of changes year in, year out, but
Hmm.
the demands are, the
Still
demands
the
are
same.
demands. Even
Yeah.
just putting something out there for folks who are considering doing this race, or maybe they're doing this race in July, or maybe they're thinking about putting this race on their bucket list. Let's give them something to kind of sink their teeth into. So with that, let's start first with, I know you've done this race before and you kind of got captivated with it, and you're friends with Tor, who's a cool, super cool guy, race director. When did you come in as one of the co-race directors?
Yeah, let me back it up a little bit further. This was my first swim run
Oh,
ever.
damn. That's right.
Wow.
And I instantly hooked. And I've given the story on previous shows, but long story short, I was pulled into it kind of last minute. I had like a month to prepare. I was already kind of training and set up for doing Attila before it was a world championship. It was just Attila. And I got pulled into it kind of last minute. Once I got in there and did the race, I got to see what swim run was really all about. B, I kind of had a preview of, okay, now I understand the training that we're doing to get ready for the world race. The last part of it just blew my mind. Like the sport, everything about it just blew my mind. So this race has a deep spot in my heart, it being the first race and it being what really kind of got me hooked on the sport. I did it in 2015 for the first time. Took a couple years to get back, life, jobs, et cetera, but went back in 2018 and did it again a second time with Dan Kimball, the guy who got me into swim run. So we did it again in 2018. And then it wasn't until 2022 that I got to go back again and I did it with Beak. It was actually in 2018 when I really kind of became friends with Tor. We talked over the next couple of years. And before we came back for the 2022 race is when he kind of talked me into, hey, why don't you come a little bit early? You can kind of give me a hand.
He put you to
And
work
then,
for that.
yep.
Setting the course. Yeah.
Yep. And that was the year that I agreed to mark the bulk of the course. And I marked the Florley side, which is the southern side of the fjord. I marked the Florley side, really kind of anticipating being able to get a lot of it done. Ended up not getting it done in time enough to catch the ferry, so I had to go back and finish the marking on it a couple days later. And then, of course, went back and did it in the race. So that year, I did the stairs at Florley 3 times in a week. So,
Wow.
but it was in 2022 that I really kind of became really good friends with Tor and helped him out with the race. And it was in 2023 that Beak and I decided that we weren't going to race it prior to Worlds. And that's when Tor's like, hey, why don't you help me race direct? So 2023 was the first year that I helped him race direct. And then, of course, last year, actually, no, I take that back. It was 2020. Oh, I'm losing my years now. It was 2021 was the first year that I helped him, and Beak and I did it. 2022, oh gosh, I'm getting them all mixed up. Okay.
That's good.
Yes,
Early
2022,
2020s.
2023. Sorry. 2023, I helped
Too
him
many
race
swim
direct.
runs. That's the problem, Marcus.
And then 2024, we did it again, and we did the full course, which is the 50K, the original course.
Yeah.
And that year, Tristan and I went out and we marked the whole course that week. So that was fun. We started marking the course at about 8 a.m. and we finished marking the course about 4 a.m. the next morning. That's
Wow.
great.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
quite the session. And I know obviously Thor knows Rockman. So,
Mhm.
they're communicating however that happens.
Yeah.
What sort of
Speed dial.
aspects of, yeah, they're sort of some telepathically potentially. Um,
Psychic tether, if you will.
what aspects of it, besides setting the course and him finding a donkey to go out there and lay a bunch of flags down, does he have you doing? Or what are you involved with from a race director standpoint?
So in 2023, it was everything. It was lining up volunteers. It was getting the aid stations prepped. It was getting the materials out for the aid station, marking the course. And that year, he was at the finish line, which was at the base camp. So Preekstolen base camp. And I took the athletes out on the ferry, kicked them all off the ferry, started the race, and handled all the
Nice.
management within the fjord that year. So I was on the safety boat back and forth in the fjord at the different aid stations and whatnot, and even pulled out some athletes and took some folks that didn't make the cutoffs out of the fjord. And then once I got out of the fjord and it was all clear, I helped with the finish line duties, and then the next day kind of cleared part of the course from the markings. Last year,
Heavily involved there. And yeah, I
Yep.
mean, it's swim runs are sometimes, especially a point to point, is like a pretty logistical, challenging
Mhm.
situation, let alone an A to B situation. So I could see how the extra support is very much needed. And
Yep.
obviously, you know what a good swim run looks like in terms of like having raced many and experience, but also now you've
Mhm.
tried your hand at race directing them as well.
Yeah, but Tor, this race could not happen without him. He knows all the people, he knows all the locations, the venue, different parts of the venue. He speaks the language, which is important. And so he is very, very good at coordinating all that. So, from a race director perspective, he's got that down pat. And he's very, very cool, calm, and collected under pressure. Anytime there's any kind of a critical situation, he's just cool and even keeled and knows what to do to get things done there. So
Yeah.
that's something that's very, very key, far beyond my abilities and being able to handle all those different aspects there. So if it wasn't for him, this race definitely would not happen. Even last year. So last year I ended up racing in addition to marking the course. Trista came on board and took some of that stuff off of my plate so I could race. I think that found out how important she is and how valuable she is. She's been asked to come back again this year as the third race director again. It's going to be a
Wow.
lot of
I
fun.
love it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
some people don't know about Tor. He's also like a world-class shit talker. Like, he talks a lot
That
of
is
trash. Talks
that
a
is
lot of
true.
trash,
Hey,
especially before the Swimmer World Championship. See you, Thor. I know you're watching. But yeah, he's a great guy. And certainly, when he started this race was the first swim run sort of outside of Sweden. Obviously, in sort of the pantheon of swim run events, this one's really on there. And it presents a lot of challenges. And we all love this race because it's extremely challenging. This is not necessarily your beginner swim run. I think, Marcus, this is a good first swim run for you because by the time you did this race, you
Yeah.
are just crazy enough to see this and take it in. Can you describe to us? So I want to do a couple things. I want to talk about gear, let's talk about training, and let's
sure,
do this
sure.
course walkthrough. But
Yeah,
first, can you talk about sort of the environment that this race takes? I mean, we know it's a fjord. You can see the photos, you can see the videos, which we highly recommend if you're trying to get stoked on this race. But this setting is really something else. So can you like describe it for people who, might be case of first impression?
sure. But before I do, he would kick my butt if I didn't give you guys the shit talking that he told me to give you before I came on the show.
Oh, so he sent you
Oh,
with a message to deliver?
how interesting.
Wow.
We had a race director meeting yesterday as we were like lining up volunteers and ordering supplies and those kind of things. And I told him that at the end of the call, I was like, oh, by the way, I'm going to be doing the show this week. And he's like, well, make sure you tell them that they need to get their butts over here and do this race. So
We
That's
he
know.
definitely
received,
wanted me
Thor.
to be
Thank
able
you.
to.
Tor send a letter to our wives and children and ask us for the hall pass.
Asked nicely.
Yep, there you go.
But yeah, it's obviously on our list, right?
I don't care what video you watch, what pictures you look at, and they're all great, especially the ones that Rasmus did. Just
Yes.
phenomenal job in putting the videos together. And the videos and the pictures that everyone takes over there, it still does not do it justice. And you guys know that. Video and pictures don't typically do it justice. This place is magical. It is just unbelievably magical. I found myself the first year I was doing it. I think first of all, let me just explain. I'm a clumsy person, right? A lot of folks claim, like if I'm running with Herbert Crable from Swimrun NC, he's like, oh, I love running behind you on the trails because you just dance around on all the technical stuff. Like, okay, great. I think I'm pretty decent at technical running, but I'm also very, very good at falling, right? I fall a lot. This race, the first year, I fell even more because I found myself oohing and ahhing at like, oh wow, look at that. Oh wow, oh gosh, look at that cliff. And I found myself just falling and kind of tripping. And I really had to kind of pay attention to what I was doing because there's a lot of places that you could really get hurt on this course. But it is
Yeah.
just
Yeah, hurt or
so
worse.
beautiful. Yeah. So beautiful, so magical. The water's pristine. The scenery of the cliffs and the scenery of the fjord is just unbelievable. We had a racer last year come to the finish line and he went up to Tor and he looks at me and Tor. He's like, thank you guys. Thank you so much from the first meter to the last. And I think that is the best way I can kind of describe it is that it's magical from the first meter to the last. It's just a beautiful, beautiful place.
Sign us up.
So
But
watch one of the recent hype videos. Rasmus Ladonius has done a lot of Attila hype
Yep.
videos, but Rockman has been working with him for the past few years. Obviously, he puts out a great product that will give
Mm-hmm.
you a good sense of what it is, build some excitement there. But yeah, to take Marcus's point, you gotta experience it for yourself to see the full beauty.
Yeah. He did the video for the past 2 years. So 2023
Nice.
race and the 2024 race. Last year, he gave several teams, including Beak and I, GoPro to take with us. And then we just dumped all the footage, like all these, was it 5 teams or 6 teams? Just dumped all this footage on him. And then at the end, before he put it all together, he even put out a request to all the racers and their families. If you've taken phone footage, if you've taken any kind of footage, send it to me and we'll wrap it into the story. And so he took all this footage that he took. He had drone footage, video that he took, and all this footage that other people took and put it into this beautiful, beautiful film.
Wow.
I can't imagine the amount of work that he put into it. It's just a beautiful film. So hit up the Rockman YouTube site, look at the 2024 film and the 2023 film. Both great pieces of work.
Yes. AI cannot replicate his work.
No, quick sidebar. How important is Rasmus Lodenius to the history of swimrun in terms of like being able to really showcase it for so many people on YouTube, right? Like his role in helping sort of inspire people to do swimrun. I don't think he's gotten enough credit. I mean, we certainly give him credit on this show, right? But like he gets it from that perspective. Like he's making these short films that inspire, that fill you with awe. And anyway, he's awesome. So
And
tip of the
feeling.
hat. Yeah.
And feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Film is probably the best way to describe it. I've thrown together videos. Back when I first befriended Tor, I've put together some Rockman videos. I've put together some other race videos that I've taken in course. And they're just that. They're videos. What Rasmus does is film. Like he tells a story.
He's a filmmaker, yes.
He's a filmmaker. He does film and he yanks at your emotions when he does it. Unmatched. Both video I've seen before and video I've seen after, unmatched for sure. And it's huge. It's motivated me to go do races.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like anyone who's on Twitter at 2:33 in the morning in the YouTube wormhole, they know exactly what they're getting. Let's talk a little bit before we get into this is swimrun's cold business, as we say on the show. Should probably put that on a t-shirt at some point. How do you think about gear for a race like this? Were you thinking thick suits, you know, dealing for multiple conditions? Like you've done it several times and obviously he's been out there a lot. Help people kind of get like wrap their head around, okay, what sort of gear considerations do you want to have for a race like this?
And there has been the addition of mandatory gear too in recent years as well.
Yep. So I always go back to the same saying when it comes to the gear that they need for a race, and it depends on the tolerance, right? So if someone has a high tolerance for cold water, then they can get by with an UTA for the race. If they don't like cold or they have a tendency to run cold, definitely Orno X. The Fjord, and Tor and I kind of go back and forth about this, and you know he's a good shit talker, so he disagrees with me. I think the Fjord is actually one of the warmest swims, even though it does get cold. I think the coldest swims are at the top of the stairs. So when you top off at Florley, you're at one of the highest elevations, and those lakes are snow fed for the purpose of generating power at the bottom of Florley, but they're still used for generating hydroelectric power. So I think that those are the coldest, and I've measured the course the past couple of years and marking it, and those are typically the coldest. I've seen them as cold in 2015. That lake at the very, very top was about 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Last year, I think it was right in about the low 50s. So it's a 53, 54 degree temp up there. And then the Fjord was, I think it was at 55 or 56 degrees. So still cold water, but I definitely think that those short swims up the top of the stairs are probably the coldest in my opinion. So if you can handle that kind of cold in an UTA, it will definitely help you because you don't have the thickness of the legs. And this is a race where you're going to be lifting your legs a lot, like not only on the stairs, but just in all the climbs. And if you have a thicker leg on your suit, you're going to get that resistance against your quads as you're trying to lift your leg. Your piriform or your psoases are going to just love you at the end of the race.
Yeah, the material might not feel like a huge difference, but 4,444 steps plus all the rocks and uneven, the incrementality of each step is exponential.
Yep.
Yeah.
So last year when we did the long course, the longest course, the OG course, Beak and I both wore UTAs. And we really, really were glad that we did that on the run across the top of the stairs. There was a 13-mile run to the finish with thousands of feet of elevation. So we were very happy that we had those suits. Now, when we're swimming, we were like, oh my God, I wish I had the Orno X right now. Especially when we got into that lake at the top of the stairs. When we got out of that lake, we kind of stood up and was kind of like running to the next swim. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, that was cold. That was Nita cold.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, from Whistler, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Oof.
So he agreed. He's
PTSD
like,
from
yep,
that.
that was Nita cold. Now it was only a 300-yard swim, but still, it was pretty chilly.
Yeah, that
Gotcha.
one is,
Gotcha.
let's just hit it 10 out of 10 on the pace because let's knock it out.
Right.
Let's keep the body moving. And you can deal with recovering from a high effort swim on that one. But yeah, let's tick
Yeah.
this box as quick as possible.
Right. Now, you mentioned some mandatory gear. Last year, since we were doing the original course, and for that 13-mile run, there's zero aid, zero support. We required folks to pack a running pack, a backpack. And in that running pack, you had a waterproof jacket, waterproof pants, headlamp, all your food, and at least a 1 liter capacity bladder or 1 liter capacity of carrying water, et cetera, et cetera. And that was in a pack. So there was a strategy decision at the top of the stairs of how do you get this pack across those 2 swims? Because there's 2 swims at the top of the stairs. And so most people just opted to wear it while they were swimming. And I had a pack that had 2 pockets on the front. So it was like drag chute.
Yeah.
That
Drag
swim,
City.
that you're
.com.
mentioning trying to get that swim over with as quickly as possible. I was trying. But back to that required gear, that was only because we had that 13-mile run at the end. So this year, we're back to a more traditional swim run course. And so the only required gear is going to be your typical, you need a wetsuit, you need a safety whistle, you need a bandage. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever nutrition you want to carry.
But still bring water.
And this is one, like, in terms of strategy, you want to have an empty flask. Kind of what's the expanse between aid stations? Like, how much nutrition? Like, for the world champs, you have all your magazines of gel wrapped around your waist or whatever. Is it like that here where you want to be packing pretty heavy starting off?
So my personal strategy when I race is I'm going to carry all the nutrition I need for the race because I'm trying to go as fast as I possibly can. Stopping at aid stations is a time sink. So I carry all the nutrition that I need. And if I need to stop at an aid station or if I want to stop at an aid station and grab some gummy bears or something that will make me feel good, then I'll do it. For folks who want to lean a little bit more towards the real foods that they can get at aid stations and reduce the amount of weight that they've got to carry, then they can do that. If you go to rockmanswimrun.com and take a look at the maps, there's an aid station in Florley, which is a couple of hours that you're going to get to that aid station. But after that, you're going to have aid stations fairly often throughout the race. Some of them will only have fluid. Some of them will only have food because of having to harvest water. Some of those aid stations, you're not going to carry 5-gallon jugs of water up to the top of it. So at some of those aid stations, we harvest the fresh water that's available. And in some places, we just can't get it. So there's information about the aid stations there. So I prefer to carry all my nutrition. Now, with fluids mentioned, all of the water, with the exception of the fjord in Rockman, is drinkable. So the lakes at the top of the stairs, the streams and creeks you come to, it's all fresh water. And generally, most of the racers will use that for their fluid throughout the race outside of the aid stations, including me. So I just carry a flexible cup and come across the stream. If I need a drink, I just grab it right out of the stream. At the top of the stairs, I tend to drink that water while I'm swimming. So it's all very, very pristine snow melt.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
You
well,
heard it
there you
here.
go. There you go. So you get to the location. It's race morning. Give us a walkthrough of let's talk about the long course because yes, there is a
Sure.
shorter 20K swim run this year, which is great. There's also a run that doesn't have any
Trail
swims,
run.
also known as a trail run. It's like a swim run minus the swim. So it's great that there's options for people. Like if maybe you don't feel like you're ready for the 40K, there's a 20K. But let's talk about the 40K because that's,
Sure.
if you're certainly if this is a self-serving podcast for us, like if we're going there, we're not going
We're
there to
doing the
do no
40K.
20K swim run. We're
Yep.
going there for the whole
Big mama.
sandwich. Yeah.
Yep. So when you show up at Stavanger, which is the town right outside of the fjord, For the long course, it's recommended that you stay in Stavanger. So find a hotel. We've got 2 different host hotels that we're recommending that there's a discount. But there's a slew of Airbnbs and hotels right there in Stavanger, a slew of restaurants. So just staying right there in city center is probably the best option for most racers. You could stay out at base camp, but it's a bus ride out or a car ride out, hour and a half-ish to get out to the base camp, which is where the finish is. But for most racers, they're going to stay in Stavanger. And the main reason why you want to stay in Stavanger is because that's where you're going to catch the ferry. So at 5 a.m., the ferry departs Stavanger. So all the racers need to be there and be ready to go. So that ferry departs at 5 a.m. You'll arrive at Florley around 6:30, depending on how quick the ferry can get there, weather, how much wind there is, that kind of thing. But we'll roll up into Florley at the base of the stairs about 6:30, and depending on once the ferry kind of gets positioned, it gets in place, we'll probably start the race about 6:45, somewhere between 6:45 and 7 a.m. Not everybody can jump off the ferry at the same time. There's a gangplank at the front. And so you kind of make your way to the front of the boat, and then each team drops off individually. So it's a jump off the ferry into the water, maybe about a 6 or 8 foot drop. And then once you're in the water, get the hell out of the way so the next team can get in the water. So don't sit there and fix your goggles and fix your cap and all that kind of stuff. Get in, go. And so we ask, since it's an individual start for every team, we ask that the racers kind of self-seed themselves. The ones that are shooting to kind of podium at the race, kind of make your way up the front. If your goal is to kind of just finish and have a good time, kind of keep back and let those people go. So kind of a self-seed start. It's approximately 1,000 meters to shore, depending on where the ferry driver ferry captain decides to put the boat. It's a pretty big ferry, so it might be 1,000. I think last year we tried to get it positioned at about 1,000, ended up being about 400. So it's a very, very short swim. So you just swim to shore, and then as soon as you swim to shore, you're starting 4,444 steps. It's about 2,400 feet vertical for a mile in distance. So it's a pretty good climb. And the stairs, they kind of vary in steepness, because it kind of follows the terrain. I've had a couple of people, I've been on the Manitou steps, the Manitou incline in Colorado. I've had a couple other people that have done Rockman and done that, and they said that's good training. Sarah Kiefer, who's going back this year, she's been training on Manitou for the stairs, but they're quite different. The steps are very, very small steps for the most part. They're 2x4 steps, and so they're not really spaced as high as like a railroad tie like what you would get at Manitou. So they're very small steps.
Just to orient folks, what's like the fast end of ascending those, and then what's on the high end of time?
So the lead pack, we'll finish that in about anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes, and that's moving. Beak and I have done it in like 50 minutes, 55 minutes before. But that lead pack, the ones that are up front, they're going to be in that 35 to 40 minute kind of range.
Really, up from there.
And then you'll see some racers that'll take, hour 15 sometimes, depending on how. We've had some teams that will stop about halfway up. There's benches along the way where you can stop and sit down if you want. So we've had some racers that have had some cramping issues early on in the race, and so they'll stop and make sure that they work that out, because that's the beginning of the race. So you don't want to blow your quads right there on the stairs and then have to deal with it for the rest of the race. So you want to kind of pace yourself based upon your training.
Right.
Once you get to the top of the stairs, it's immediately into that short swim. That's going to be probably, in my opinion, the coldest swim of the day, those 2 lakes that we have up there. When you get out of that first swim, it's an off-trail, rocky, thick grass to begin with. And then once you top the hill, it turns into like this moon landscape where it's just barren rock with boulders. Like, how the hell did that big boulder get there? Like, it just looks like it's been placed there. So you're kind of running zigzag kind of through this boulder field that's kind of sitting on top of this hill. And then you descend down to another lake, and it's another 400 or 500 meter kind of swim across that lake, depending on where we put you in and where you take out. Both of those lakes are smaller lakes that are being fed by a larger lake. And in that larger lake, we have our 4th swim, which right now is kind of on the precipice of being probably canceled, or it's about 50-50 that we'll cancel that swim and eliminate it, or we'll have it. And it really is, right now it's going to be two things that's going to drive that decision. One's going to be the temperature of that water, and then the second thing is going to be wind. Year before last, when we had that swim, Nico and his partner swam it. The second place team swam it, and the emergency folks yanked the rest of the racers out and said, nope, you keep going. You're going to skip this swim. Because those two teams really had a little bit of a challenge getting through that swim because it was so windy. So they knew that those two teams, being the stronger of the field, if they were having a challenge getting through that swim, they're like, all right, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
So our safety personnel shut that down.
Good call.
Yeah. So when we mark the course on Tuesday of the race, we're going to make a final decision if that fourth swim is going to be included or not. From there, it's a technical descent all the way back down to the fjord, back down to sea level. So you've got a 2,500 foot descent back down to sea level.
And do you go back down the stairs?
No, it's all
Like
single track.
switchbacky?
Well, from the very top, there's a little bit of gravel road, which turns into a single track trail through a field, and you got sheep all around you. And it's kind of a grassy field that's wide open, so you can see a long way. You can see the mountains on the other side of the fjord. And then, of course, you've got sheep all around you, and there's like small boulders kind of strewn throughout. So it's a small rut almost that you're running in. So you have to be careful of those little boulders that are sticking out that can ankle bite you.
Yeah.
As you're running along.
Snake bit.
Yep. And then you cross a swinging bridge, and as soon as you cross that swinging bridge, bam, you're in forest, like thick pine forest. And it kind of starts doing this switchback descent all the way back down to the fjord. And then when you come out of that forest, you're dumped out into this little village of Florley. And so you're running kind of zigzag through this village back down to the water. So it's just beautiful. If you watched the film from 2 years ago that Rasmus did, he shows the field like single line, like the entire field going up the stairs. And he shows a lot of footage of people running down that forest and through the village.
Nice.
So he does a really good job of capturing that. Once you get down to the bottom of Florley, then you have the longest swim of the day, which is a little over a mile. You're basically crossing the fjord. And that's what really, if you look at any of the pictures, if you look at footage of Florley, or you look at any of the video, that fjord is a mile across. So that gives you an idea of the vastness and the expanse of this area. And that swim is about a mile across. There's another place that Tor and I kind of go back and forth and butt heads on. There's a little bit of a current, depending on whether you've got the tide coming in or the tide going out. And it depends on the time of the day. But you don't get current like you would, say, at Casco Bay when you've got the tide movement. So it's a lot less movement than what you'd see at Casco Bay from a current, but there is still a current. So you still have to kind of make sure you stay straight. And the problem is that what we found is that when people get to the bottom of Florley and they look across, they're squinting. They're like, where am I getting out at? Like, they're looking a mile across. And so instead what we have is one of the big triangular yellow buoys that sits over there. And then they spot the buoy like, okay, got it. And so they'll take off for that. And as you get closer and closer and closer, it doesn't seem like the buoy is getting any closer. It's so vast that it's like, damn, I just don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. And then next thing you know, you're getting out of the water. And when you do get out of the water, it's a little small dock. And that dock is owned by a farmer who owns that land on the north side of the fjord across from Florley. When you get out on his dock, you'll start this zigzag climb up a scree field. There's a couple of good pictures out there on the website, but it's just a slow zigzag all the way up the side of the fjord, and it gives away to forest, and then it dumps you out into his field just below his house. Again, he's a sheep farmer, so he's got sheep everywhere, right? So you'll dump out right below his house. In years past, they typically are out there on their deck cheering you on as you go by.
Nice.
And then when you get up onto the pavement of his driveway, just past his house, was what we discussed on Monday, and it's probably going to be again this year. There's going to be a little pop-up tent, and you're going to have Tor's daughter and her friend there cooking fresh waffles. So you're going to have fresh Norwegian waffles that you can snatch, jam that you could put on them. In years past, I'll grab one, roll it up, and run with it as I'm running. You'll stay on asphalt, and this is the only asphalt of the race. You'll stay on asphalt from the farmer's land all the way down to Songasan, the little small port town of Songasan. And it's a downhill road run for about 4 miles. So it's nice and easy. Let gravity do the work. Munch on your waffle. You get to pass by a bunch of villages, and you're running basically along a creek. So you've got a creek on the right-hand side. A good visual for those that are going to be doing the race is at some point you're going to cross over where you're running on the left side of the creek. At some point you're going to cross over a bridge, and then you're going to run the rest of the way with the creek to your left. So you're going to cross over that creek and run with the rest of the creek to your left. That bridge is exactly the halfway point of that run. So when you get to that bridge, you know that that road run is halfway over. And then you can kind of book it on down.
I like it. Mark it on your paddle, draw in your hieroglyphics,
Yep.
draw a little bridge, and then you'll
Little
know.
bridge.
Little Golden Gate Bridge or something.
Yeah.
So Marcus, let's pause you there. So
Okay.
that's like
Pause.
so that's run 5 on the course. Would you say that the first section, like you jump off the boat, like it's like that's if we had to break this into thirds, that's sort of
Yep.
like the first segment of the
Florida.
race. And once you cross the fjord and you're on this side going to Songasand, that's kind of the second segment of the race. How are you thinking in terms of pacing? Like, obviously, as you mentioned, you want to be conservative on these steps. It's kind of like you obviously have to get through that section to finish the race. You don't want to burn all your matches, but how are you thinking in sort of tactics? It's like, okay, now you're on run 5, moving right along. Are you thinking of speeding up, still be mindful of what's ahead? What's your thinking like at that point in the race?
So I like to break it up. This particular course, and that's something to note, is that this is one of those types of races, kind of like Casco, where it changes year to year. So there's usually something new, or there's some kind of a twist. Like last year, we did the 50K course. The year before, we did this same reverse course, but this isn't the same course as that year. This particular course, I'd like to break it up into 4 sections. So there's the southern section, which is all of Florley. So the Florley loop, if you will. That loop, I'm going to be conservative on the stairs because, again, if you blow your quads, you're going to be in for it. And then I'm going to go downhill at a pretty good clip because that first section of that downhill where you're running through the field, you can keep a pretty good pace, and since it's downhill, you're not having to brake a whole lot, so you can pick up the pace through that field. And then once you get into the trees and it starts to get this final little zigzag descent, you're having to really brake a lot because it's again, looking at the video that Rasmus did from 2 years ago, he has some video of like Nico and Peter Oom and them kind of coming and descending down this section where you're literally grabbing a hold of trees to kind of keep yourself from falling forward because it's that steep. And in that section, I tend to pull back a little bit because if you're braking too much, again, you're really kind of blowing your quads out. And if you haven't been practicing downhill running in your training, you're really going to feel that effects. And knowing that this is the first quarter of the race, I don't want to try and make or break myself in this race in this first quarter section.
More likely to break yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that video I mentioned, Peter Oom's partner has a big old knot right on the middle of his shin and blood all running down his shin. So it was very early on in the race that he hit that. But yeah, coming forward to that road run down to Songasan, now we're in that second section of the race. And I like to break up that section into after the fjord crossing. That's the beginning of that section. And in my mind, the end of that section is getting out at Brotley. So I've kind of fast forwarded quite a bit, but after that downhill road run, and then you get another aid station at the bottom of that, then starts what we call the Seaside Sprint. The Seaside Sprint, the original creators of the race, when they created it back in 2014, they created the section and they called it the Seaside Sprint. And when Dan and I were sitting in the race briefing, listening to them talk about the different sections of the race, they came to the Seaside Sprint. And they said, yes, and this section's the Seaside Sprint. And most of the room erupted into like this laughter. And Dan and I are like, what?
What's so funny?
So when you get onto that part of the course, you'll see there's nothing sprinting about it. There's absolutely nothing sprinting about it. It's not a sprint at all. because it is probably one of the more technical sections of the course. So from Songasan all the way to Bakken, which is where you're going to start your next swim, it is basically boulder crawling, rock hopping, hand over fist climbing,
Teamwork.
scrambling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teamworky.
Yep.
Vale,
Several
Vale
places.
Island for those folks, like kind of that,
Right.
or more vertical, or both.
More technical than Vale. So
Wow.
there's a couple of things that you have to worry about in that section that, or not worry. There's a couple of things in that section that make it a little bit more technical than Vale. Vale, for the most part, is flat. When you're running across it, I'm not saying it's a flat, smooth surface. It's not smooth. It's rocky, but it's flat. So you can kind of just make your way across the different height of rocks. Take Vale and now throw an angle to it, so that you're scrambling on these rocks that's on the side of a cliff. So there's times where you're running along and it's a straight down drop on your left and a straight up on your right, and so you're forced to take this particular line. There's sections where there's chains that you have to hold on to keep it from sliding off. There's sections that are just huge boulders that literally you reach out and grab a rock and kind of push yourself up on top of it. For those that are height disadvantaged, there's some challenges there too. So I'm looking at you, Amy Bush. So there's
Shout out,
On
Amy.
blast.
Shout out,
Shout
Amy.
out.
Shots
she'll be,
fired.
yeah.
Caught astray.
No. She'll be the first to admit. She's like, really, Marcus? You guys make us go this way? But yeah, there's definitely some sections where it's a challenge to climb up and get over and whatnot. So it's more technical than Vale, and it's a little bit longer distance than Vale through that section. But it's probably one of my favorite parts to run for sure.
Of course. You're drawn to those types of things.
Once you get through the Seaside Sprint, you'll come to another dock called Bakken. And at Bakken, there will be another aid station on the dock. And then there's, I think it's, don't hold me on the distance, I think it's 11 or 1,200 meter swim from Bakken to Brotley, which is another dock. The challenge with this swim is we call it the Hillside Swim because there's a cliff to your right as you're swimming it. And you
Nice.
can't see the final destination because it's around a bend that you have to go. And so you just basically have to kind of swim for the point that you see that's sticking out in the water. And then once you get past that point, then you can see the Brotley dock. That swim is challenging from a temperature perspective. And it's challenging from a temperature perspective, especially in this direction, because the further you go in the swim, the colder the water gets for two reasons. Time exposure. But the second reason is that as you get closer and closer to Brotley, there's more and more waterfalls that are dumping into the fjord. So you're constantly swimming by these waterfalls that are dumping all this cold water into the fjord. And so as you're going along, it gets colder and colder. And I always like to tell people, like, don't let it go to your head. You're not getting cold because you've been in the water too long. The water really is colder as you're getting closer to Brotley. So just kind of keep that in your mind and tough it out. So you'll be fine.
It's
That's
like
a good.
don't hang around to observe the waterfalls too much. You
No.
gotta keep swimming.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
gazing at the waterfalls. But
Yep.
that's a great pro tip there, Marcus, because I know at the Otelo Catalina, that last swim, being around 1,400 meters, and they're 20, 30 minutes potentially for some folks. And yeah, by the end of that, you maybe are getting a little bit cold. That's a good point to note.
And the thing is that the year before when we did the course in this direction and I was race directing, I was on the Brotley dock towards the tail end of that cutoff. And so as people were getting out, you could really kind of tell that they were weary. But once they got out, they were fine. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that don't let that coldness kind of get to your head and cause you to feel defeated as you're doing that swim. Because a lot of people don't take into consideration that there's cold water being dumped into the fjord. Instead, they think, oh, I'm getting overly cold because I can't take it. Just know the reasons behind it. And I think that mentally it'll keep you a little bit stronger.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, yeah, if it's getting colder, it just means you're getting closer to the ant, right?
Yeah,
So it's like the
Good
colder it
exactly.
point.
gets, the closer you are to getting done. If that helps you, it's like, hey, it's starting to get cold. Sweet, we're like halfway there,
Yep.
whatever it is. So yeah, turn that frown upside down for a lot of this stuff. It can get you through this. But I mean, that swim sounds amazing with the waterfalls and everything else. So that section, give us a sense of like how much time this section two, as you're calling it, like takes? Like the sprint section. I mean, obviously it's going to be a lot of hikey. It's going to take time. You want to make sure you got good footing. Is that another like, give us like it's just like you did with the stairs. Like, how quickly are the fast teams moving through this, and or your average teams would be moving through?
It varies so much on people's skill. I know there's several people that can get through that fast section in 30 minutes. And I've known people that have taken well over an hour. So it's going to be a big variety. Brotley is going to be our first course cutoff. Now, we have it set right now for 1 p.m., and we're thinking about pushing that a little bit further, mainly because we think that's probably a little aggressive. So we've had, on Monday, we did the discussion about when we're going to do the cutoffs, and then what we're going to do is we're going to sit down and look at the times from 2 years ago and see what we think is appropriate. 2 years ago, that race was held in August, and in August, we had a lot less daylight. So a lot of our cutoffs were based upon how much daylight do we have. We want to make sure all the people get off the course before it gets dark. And then last year, we had people run with headlamps. But based a lot of our cutoffs 2 years ago based upon daylight. Well, having it moved to July in the middle of the summer, I just got off the phone with a Zoom call with Osa over in Sweden, and it's 10 o'clock, 10:30, and it's still daylight outside behind her. So we've got plenty of daylight. So now what we're trying to do is we're trying to factor in how can we give people the most time that they can to do the course and still keep the volunteers happy.
Oh, yeah,
Because
for sure.
Good thinking.
they're the ones that are using their time to kind of support us. And what we're probably going to end up doing is maybe a couple of shifts so that we don't have volunteers standing out there for many, many hours. So we want to be respectful for them. So that's the calculation we're working on. So expect some updates over the next week or so on what those cutoffs are.
Okay. Yeah, but right now
Nice.
you said it's at a
1
1
p.m.
p.m. So, decent amount of time if the race is starting at 7 to make it to that point. Now, would you say once you get to that cutoff, is that sort of now we're at the beginning of section 3 of the
Yep,
course? All
absolutely.
right,
So once you get to that
walk us through
dock,
that.
section 3, yeah. One thing about Brotley is in years past, we've called that the party dock because there's a couple of people that manage that aid station that have done it a couple of years in a row. And they bring out music and they're hooping and hollering. They've got a fire going, a fire pit going. So if you get too cold, you can sit by the fire. Like it's a great place to be. And I got to spend, probably an hour there 2 years ago when I was race directing. It was quite the party going on there. It was great.
Energize you,
Yep.
inject some energy, and revitalize you.
I had one team that got out of the dock, immediately went to the fire. A couple of volunteers put blankets over them, and I just knew that these guys are done. Like they were sitting there so cold and kind of shivering. Okay. In my mind as a race director, I'm thinking, how many people do I need to get back to base camp? So I'm doing a count. I'm like, all right, here's a team. All right. I turn around to the fire, and these guys are gone. Like 1 minute they're sitting there shivering with blankets on it. Next minute they're heading up the hill. Like, all right.
Nice.
Get out. The beginning of section 3 is the climb from Brotley. It's straight up through another sheep field and pretty straight up. Following along a creek, you cross over the creek over a bridge, and then you think your climbing's done, and then you climb some more. And it's just this zigzag single track through the woods, beautiful multiple creek crossings, places where you can get fluid, places where you have to wade through the creeks depending on how much rain we've got. Could be ankle deep, could be waist deep. It really depends on how much rain we've gotten. But just a beautiful climb all the way up to Ska Vanet, which is going to be the next swim. It's a small lake. This lake is one of the black lakes, as I call it, because it looks black, but it's crystal clear once you get in it. It's just looking down in it, you can't really see anything because there's nothing in the bottom of it. But it's one that I call the black lakes. And it's a nice swim across the lake and then back onto single track as you climb up to what I call the crossroads. Looking at the map, you'll see I call it the crossroads because the course kind of crosses itself there. I think Tor refers to it as the intersection. I like to call it the crossroads. Tomato, yeah. Right? Yeah. Right? But it's a grueling, technical, wet climb all the way up to this intersection. So you come out of Brotley and it's straight up. You'll zigzag up some more, and then it kind of tops off to a plateau to where it's a little bit of down, a little bit of up, a little bit of down, a little bit of up. And so you're constantly descending and climbing until you get to Ska Vanet. Once you get through Ska Vanet, then you start this gradual climb that just kind of gets steeper and steeper until you get up to that crossroads. And it is single track, tall grass. You feel like you're in a swamp sometimes. You feel like you're on a very technical trail on the other. It's very undescribable. 2 years ago, when Amy and Trista did it, I was getting a few choice words thrown at me once they came up that trail because they were done with that technical climb. So you get to the crossroads.
Those words need to be saved for Tor. Just
Right.
saying. Just saying.
Yeah, or Rockman himself.
Just like, please call customer service. Here's a comment box.
I think it was that year that Tor decided to put on the website, like, Rockman declares there should be no whining.
After hearing racer feedback, we've decided no whining policy has been instituted.
The tagline, I guess I should have said this at the beginning of the call. So each race, and I'll pause for the crossroads because it gets fun from here on out. Each race is considered an episode, right? The creators of the race decided to create the Rockman story behind it. And they kind of did it like, they're also Star Wars fans. And so they like the fact that Star Wars started off with episodes 4, 5, and 6, right? So they started off in the middle of the story with Rockman helping a fair maiden fight off a monster, right? But as the episodes went on, they kind of like went back and forth in time as far as the young Rockman, the beef that Rockman has with Tor the god, so forth and so on. And so every year the race has a different episode. And of course, there's an episode title like Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. This year's title is Harder and Colder. It being the earliest it's ever been, meaning it's going to be colder because it's the closest to snow melt and those kinds of things. And then harder because we've added some new sections to the race, which is going to make it tougher. So this is now the fourth, what I consider the fourth section. Once you've made it to the crossroads, you're now in what I consider the fourth section. Could be after you've gone to pulpit, could be before you go to pulpit, take your pick. So the crossroads is where there's an out and back to pulpit and back. So you'll come back to this same intersection before you continue the race. Obviously, it's called Preekstolen, but it's referred to as the Pulpit Rock. And this is where you're on tourist path. And that's very, very important from a racer perspective because there are tourists that come to the base camp and then hike up to Preekstolen and then hike back down. So if there's going to be a crowded part of the race, it's this part of the race. So you're on a tourist path along with tourists. Please, 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 if you race this race, please don't shove any tourists because you could potentially shove them off a cliff. So be nice, be courteous, and just know that you're on the path with kids, you're on the path with tourist adults, people who may not be as physical fit as you. So it's easier for you as a racer to kind of go around a tourist than it is for you to kind of plow through them. Like, we've never had a problem with this. So I'm hoping that it'll never be a problem.
You can picture buoy out front like a cattle catch and just barrel through them like that.
Right.
It's funny.
But
Yeah. How do you say on your left?
Yeah.
It's too funny. Yeah. And Pulpit Rock is obviously, I mean, this
Incredible
whole race is
scenery.
really picturesque, but Pulpit Rock, like this is, as you mentioned, where tourists go to kind of get their Instagram stories filled, where the cup filleth over with awesome imagery.
And if you go to my YouTube page, you'll see a video where I start the video off with us sitting on the edge of Pulpit Rock with Beak and I. So when you start from the crossroads and run out to Pulpit, the first half or so of that run is just rock bald. And you're following the signage for the tourists, which is this red letter T. For the most part, when you're following any of the markings in the course, it's this red T marking. So you're following these signs for the tourists all the way out to Pulpit. Once you get out to Pulpit, we have a person there checking the bibs off to make sure that you've actually come to Pulpit. There'll also be someone there taking photos, so you can take a quick moment to get your photo on Pulpit Rock as part of the race. It's also a good way of verifying that you were there. And once you've done that, you turn around and run back to the crossroads. The second half of that, so the first half of it is just rock ball. The second half of it is literally running cliffside, where it's an 1,800, 2,000 foot drop straight down to the fjord.
Step.
Definitely watch your step.
Mind the gap.
I tend to like to run on the edge so I can see the views, but there's plenty of room for you to not have to be right on the edge. So that if you don't like that and you're a little afraid of heights, then you don't have to run that. It's a beautiful picturesque. You can see the entire fjord. I've got a picture of Pulpit Rock as my desktop wallpaper that I stare at every day. Once you get to Pulpit, here is where the long course and the shorter course merge. So the shorter course is we can talk about that course in a second, but they meet at Pulpit. And then from there on out, they share the same course to the finish line. So if you've been running the race so far alone, here's an opportunity where you may meet up with some of the short coursers, because the shorter course, I have to be careful not to call it short course because it's not short. It's shorter. The shorter course isn't starting until 10:15, 10:30.
Ooh,
So
I like that.
Definite opportunity for you to meet up with some of the short coursers, especially if you're in the front part of the race. You run back to the crossroads. When you get to the crossroads, now you're going to go single track trail to a part of the race that's brand spanking new to the race. We're calling it the Path of the Ancients. This Path of the Ancients is going to be still a lot of climbing, a lot of technical, and there's still another swim over on this path. So if you think that your technical running is over with when you get to the Pulpit Rock, it is not. It is still going to keep going. That Path to the Ancients and to that next to the last swim is just picturesque. Matthew, who raced it last year, before the race, he had hiked up on this mountain and saw down to that lake. When I mentioned to him that we're going to have that as part of the course, he was like, really? He was super excited because he got to see that before he did Rockman last year. So he's pretty pumped about that area of the race. That gets you, once you get to the crossroads and start that ancient path, you're now no longer on the tourist path. So there might be hikers out there, but for the most part, the tourist path is not there. You'll go out, do that swim, and then run back towards the tourist path, cross over the tourist path, and start your descent to your final swim. Your descent to the final swim is what we call the hidden path, because it was a trail that Tor and I made. It wasn't part of the normal trail system out there. Tor and I found this creek that kind of made its way up, and we needed a way to get people up to that spot. And so we made this trail up to that spot. And so we call it the hidden path because it was hidden for so many years until Rockman found it.
I like it.
This is another one of those, like the technical descent up to crossroads where it's tall grass and rocks and roots and wet and muddy coming up to crossroads. This is kind of the equivalent to a descent of that. So it's very, very waist-high grass. You sometimes can't see the rocks in front of you, so you have to feel your way as you're going through. And it zigzags down to the final swim, which ends at the beach of the base camp. Then your final stretch is to run up to the finish line. And that is your long course.
Yeah, so that clocks in at, so we're talking 40 Ks,
Yep.
34K of running, 6.5K of swimming, 8,500 feet of total elevation across 9 swims and 9 runs. Also, not a lot of swim runs start with a swim. Bonus points for starting a swim run with the S rather than, it should really have been called run swim, if you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so like any swim run, so huge props for even showing up at the start line. Obviously, huge props for going out there, whether you finish or not. How are you helping people? I know you're a coach for Envol. How are you helping people kind of wrap their head around the training? I mean, obviously tons of climbing, obviously tons of steps, but beyond that stuff, like what sort of nuanced training are you recommending, or is sort of like Envol coaching recommending to kind of get people kind of ready for this? And are there sort of key sessions that you think would be really helpful in that, we'll be releasing this about maybe a little bit less than a month from race day. Anything that you recommend there?
Okay. Yep. Certainly can. Obviously, we're so close to the race right now that some of this can't be implemented until you decide to race it like next year. It's a little late in the training cycle to implement some of the stuff. But the very first thing that I always like to recommend on folks is make your runs as technical as possible. Just hands down, it's a technical race. There's 4 miles-ish of pavement. The rest of it is technical. The absolute rest of it is technical. It is not, and there's one section at the top of Florida that's a gravel road. The rest of it is single track trail or technical. And it's not just a patch of technical and then you get this nice, beautiful trail and then there's a patch of technical. The entire race is technical. So if I haven't said the word technical enough, get in your technical training.
Drink.
I think that it's a skill, and it's a skill that if you don't use it, you lose it. So for the folks who don't live close to technical trails or don't have access to technical trails, I've got an athlete that I coach right now that lives in Louisiana, lives below sea level. It's flat as a pancake, and there's no technical trails. So can she still train and still get ready for the race? Absolutely. But as you get closer and closer to the race, it's very, very important that you move a lot of those runs as much as possible to technical trails so you pick up those skills. And it's not just the footing skills that we all think of. That's vastly important. Obviously, you want those technical skills of the footing, but it's also all the little micro decisions that your brain has to make. Do I put my foot there? Or do I put my foot there? Or do I step on that rock? Or do I step on that flat spot? And then, I need to make a quick change and adjustment. All those little micro decisions is something that you kind of need to train yourself for as well.
That's a great point.
Right, and almost like the concentration that's required, because as you mentioned, like
Yep.
it's kind of easy to kind of zone out a little bit. I mean, this is certainly true for a course like the World Championship, right? Like it's almost requires you to be engaged like more than you might be used to if you're just used to like, slogging some miles like down a road or something like that. So yeah, I think that's a point really well taken. You have to train almost like not just the footing, but almost like your mental muscle to prepare you for like just hours upon hours of having to be really mindful about where you're stepping.
Right. Let your mind down. You're going to be on your face. Hands down.
It's like speaking for a
We've seen you
friend.
in action.
Got a
Awesome.
busted rib right now because of it.
Awesome. Awesome.
So and it's not just the technical skill. Obviously, you guys both mentioned both climbing and you mentioned stairs. So the stair masters in the gym or something like Manitou Climb don't really one for one match what you're going to see on the floorless stairs because they're really small steps, but they're still great from a mental perspective. I've heard athletes say that when they went and saw Manitou for the first time and they were like, oh my God, it clicked. All right, this is what I need to be prepared for when I roll up on the ferry at the bottom of the floorless stairs. Okay, from a visual perspective, I get it now. And the stairmasters and stair climbing, stairwell climbing, when I lived in Charlotte, I couldn't get out and go to somewhere where I could get in hill climbing. I would do hotel stairs, like just up and down, up and down, up and down. Or when I was traveling, hotel stairs, they're always there. Find the tallest hotel I could find, hop in the stairwell, and there's my workout. From a climbing perspective, because it's 8,500 feet of climbing, there's the two things that you really need to be able to train, which is difficult to do in places where the closest hill that I have to me or closest climbing that I have to me is about 700 feet. And so I'll do 700 feet up and down, up and down, up and down, and up and down. But that still doesn't quite match what you need from a climbing perspective. And so what I'll do about once a month is I'll make a trip to the mountains where I've got real hills, real climbing, to where I have to do sustained climbing for half hour, hour and a half at a time. And then also the same thing for the descending. Because it's not just the climbing you need to worry about. You need to be able to do the descent. You've got to have the durability for that descending as well. You get up to the top of Florley, if you've done all the climbing work, great, you're at the top of the Florley, but guess what? Now you've got a 2,400 foot descent back down to the fjord. And if you haven't trained for that descending, that braking that you have to do for that, then what's going to happen is your quads are still going to be blown out whenever you get ready to climb up across the fjord. So big climbing, and that's what we're doing for most of our athletes is about once a month. They've got a big weekend where they have to do big volume, big climbing, big descending, and there's some other stuff that's kind of worked into that. The other thing that we tend to do is on those big weekends, it's back-to-back days. So you get the compounding effect of having a big day followed by a big day, and then you also get what it's like to do training on tired legs because you've done that first day. And so that's the type of training that we're really kind of found has been successful for the athletes that have done that and done Rockman. That's probably the biggest thing that I can do. Swimming is swimming, cold acclimation is cold acclimation, but the climbing and the descending is what's going to really, and the technical. Those are the three things that's going to make you or break you in this race.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
We
Did you
did.
do all that from your head? That's very impressive, Marcus. And that was quite the scene you painted
No,
for
man,
us.
Marcus has like
Yeah.
4 computer screens
Yeah, he's got
referencing.
quadruple monitors.
Yeah, he's like
Yeah.
an air traffic controller over there. Well, real quickly, so there is a 20K swim run option for folks who don't want
Mhm.
to do the full, path to the
Yep.
gods or whatever it's being called this year, and also a trail run. The 20K starts and ends from base camp and kind of
Yep.
does a big loop around that way.
Yep. So it starts at base camp and it starts with a run. There's a very, very small swim just to kind of get you cooled down. And then you'll swim back down to or you'll run back down to the base camp lake. You'll do about 1,000 meter, I think it's actually like 800 meters from a side of the shore, kind of swim in the base camp lake.
Mm.
You'll get out, you'll do some real technical muddy climbing. That's where Amanda Nielsen busted her knee last year. There's some grates that they put out there in the mud so that you have some traction. They're like plastic grates that you put out there so you have some traction. And she slipped and hit her knee on the grate.
Ooh.
And you could see the cross of the grate cut in her knee.
Oh,
And that was at the beginning of the race, and she still finished the race and won the race. So,
Well, she's a beast.
yeah,
beast.
yeah.
Just put it out there. She's a beast.
Yep. And so between that swim and your next swim, it's muddy, it's slippery. You might step into a knee-deep hole of mud. It looks like it's 6 inches deep. Next thing you know, you're in up to your knees. And there's also some technical climbing, hand over hand kind of climbing till you get to your next swim. Your next swim is going to be a little island hop. There's a small island in the middle of the lake. So you'll island hop that. So you get 2 more swims
Nice.
out of that. Very quick in and out. There's no trail on the island other than the one that we've made from previous years running across it. So it's kind of high stepping through high grass. And then you'll make your ascent, your climb all the way up to above Preekstolen. So you'll come out on the cliff's edge. You'll be able to see down into the fjord. You'll be at about 2,300 feet above the fjord, cliffside, straight down, looking down into the fjord. And then you'll top a hill. And as you top the hill, you'll be like, oh, there's going to be Pulpit Rock below you.
Yeah.
So you're going to be looking down on top of Pulpit Rock, and you'll have to kind of make your way down to Pulpit. And then once you hit the Pulpit, again, like I mentioned before, you'll marry up with the long course racers, and the rest of that course will be the same.
Cool.
The 20K trail runners do that entire course. It's just that they bypass the swims. So they're getting the same runs, the same climbs, the same feel for the race, but they're just skipping the swims. So we have people that are going to be standing at each one of those intersections, kind of directing trail runners to go this way and swim runners go that way. And that should only be at the beginning of the race because we're going to start the trail runners about 15 to 20 minutes before the swim runners. So they should be long gone by the time the swim runners make their way in. You'll probably have the front pack of the swim runners catching the back pack of the trail runners a little bit. So after your 4th swim on the swim run, the climb up to above Preekstolen is really steep. There might be a ladder involved. I cannot confirm or deny.
I love it. I love it. I mean, we said at the beginning, this race is epic. Still don't believe us? I don't know what to tell you. Like, after
We
listening to
can't.
this or
You're
watching this,
unconvincible.
yeah, we're not going to try to convince you anymore. This race is awesome. It's taking place on July 5th this year.
Yep.
Super stoked for it. Huge American contingent going out there to do it. Huge Envol contingent going out there to do it. It's going to be great to see the videos and all the social media stuff. So you can head over to rockmanswimrun.com to learn more. Go to Speedy Lizard on YouTube to watch Marcus's videos. I'm sure there's a lot of Rockman content there. It's also the Rockman YouTube channel. Thank you, Marcus, for this 1 hour knowledge bomb you just dropped on everyone. Did we miss anything?
Stay tuned on the Rockman Swimrun Instagram site. As we're marking the course that week, we're going to be constantly updating it. So you'll get some good scenery pics and some good behind the scene footage of the course and the course markings. Starting on Tuesday, we'll probably start at Monday, but that entire week leading up to the race, we're going to be constantly putting content out there.
Nice.
FOMO's going to be real.
Good plug on that one.
FOMO's going to be sky high. Yeah, and we say it on the show a lot. And Marcus, I know you say this in your coaching. It's like, hey, as much information as you can have going into the race, you make it more likely for you to have the experience that you want to have, which is a successful one. You want to have an adventure. You don't want it to be an ordeal. So, take this video if you're watching it, or if you're listening to it on, in your ears of whatever podcast you listen on. have the map with you, follow along with us, kind of start visualizing when you are,
Yep.
pull up the maps, in the videos from
Mhm.
Rasmus's from a few years ago, and really kind
Yep.
of start getting a sense of wrap your head around what this is going to look like, so that when you're there, you can really be there and really be present and enjoy it and just have an awesome, awesome day.
Yeah. Know the maps. We do an outstanding job, Patton, a little bit. We try our best to do an outstanding job on marking the course, but knowing the maps. And I think that goes for any swim run. The more you know the course, the better you can race it, the better you can be strategic with it, the better you can plan your nutrition, the better you can
The
effort.
better it should go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
definitely study the maps.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. Love
Yeah.
you. You're the
Love you
best.
guys.
See ya.
See ya.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a rating or review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swim run.
Check out our website, lowtideboyz.com. That's boys with a Z, for swimrun resources, including gear guides, tips, how-to videos, and so much more. Make sure to check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boyz on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, send us a DM or email us at lowtideboyz@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swim run and other activities.
Lots of activities.
Lots of activities.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
Then a run,
And then a swim,
then another run,
then another swim.
then run some more.
Just keep going.
Let's go.
And then stop at some point because,
And fuel. Don't forget to fuel.
Gotta fuel
Of
too.
course, yes.
And